Alright, so this is going to be a presentation on accessibility and human-computer interaction.
Okay, so computer accessibility deals with computers that are accessible to all people, regardless of ability, socioeconomic class, and so on. So the four categories of accessibility for abilities that we'll be talking about today are sight, hearing, cognitive, and fine motor. For sight, problems that people may have can be degrees of blindness or sight impairments, astigmatism or color blindness, and then some sight-related technology to help out with those things would be larger fonts used on websites and so on, and then high contrast screens, screen magnifiers, auditory feedback, screen readers, color enhancing extensions or software, and refreshable braille displays. So yeah, there's an example of, here will be an example of text-to-speech software.
This is an example of a text-to-speech reader. It can read large documents and allows people with vision or visual processing difficulties to read large blocks of text. The voice doesn't sound natural, but since this is a free program, it doesn't really have to.
And then here's an example of image descriptions. So if you can't see and you have your screen reading software, then the screen reading software will just read off whatever was inputted as the description for the images, so that people with their sight impairments can still get a feel for everything that's on the page without actually being able to see it all.
And I don't think that they meant to do this, but you'll notice a typo in the image description, and that kind of stuff happens a lot because people don't put a whole lot of effort into image descriptions.
And then here's a page showing the example of some different color blindnesses that you may have. It's a software that allows for people to see specifically what the pages may look like to people with these sight impairments, which can be good for maybe people developing web pages so that they can see what their web page will look like to all kinds of people with different sight levels. And then for hearing, some problems that people may have would be HOH, deafness, or hyperacusis. And then the hearing-related technologies to help with those can be closed captioning, transcriptions, instant messaging, and more.
So when we're talking about fine motor control, we're talking about a whole bunch of different conditions that people have to find accommodations for. This can include things like dyspraxia, Parkinson's, cerebral palsy, carpal tunnel, which is a repetitive motion injury, which means that we have to find ways to decrease the number of times people click and type. Arthritis, which decreases joint mobility, and MS, which decreases sensation and mobility, often in the hands. So there's a whole bunch of tech that helps with people who have these conditions and other conditions. And those include swipe keyboards. So if you look right here, this keyboard comes with every Android phone. And what you do is you put your finger on the first letter, and then you drag your finger through the rest of the letters in the word. This keyboard happens to say swipe on it. And this allows people who have reduced hand sensation to avoid just tapping the screen because they can't feel it. It increases typos. But with swipe, it's much easier for them to tell where their fingers are, what they're doing, and it decreases typos and increases speed and accuracy. Over here, you're going to see an old model of a one-handed keyboard. This is for someone who has complete use of their right hand, and it works obviously much the same as a two-handed keyboard. These are two different kinds of switches. This one provides binary input on and off, while this one provides a cursor. It's a joystick, as well as the clicking input. There are a whole lot of voice assistants like Siri, Cortana, Alexa, and this allows people to interact with their computers without physically interacting with them. Up here is a mouse. This is designed for people to use with their lips, with their tongues, with their noses, whatever you can use to move those cute little knobs around. That's what you use to move your cursor around. Over here is called the sit-puff switch, and it has binary input, puffing through the provided straw, blowing out, and then sucking in. And we'll talk much more about that later, so kind of pay attention to that setup over there. Over here is a computer and a camera that tracks head movement. It tracks your head and it turns that into cursor movement and allows you to type with an on-screen keyboard in addition to normal navigation. Predicted text is what makes this keyboard actually, feasible, because it means that it's much less tedious. You only have to hit a few letters per word. This is a foot mouse. It does exactly what you think it does. And this is an eye gaze tracker, which works much the same as the head tracking software, but it tracks eye movement instead. So it accommodates a wider range of people. Dragon Dictation is a dictation software that's pretty niche. It's designed only for text documents, but it's really good at what it does, which is why it gets a mention here. It's very good for long text documents, so things like academic journals and books and articles. When we're talking about cognitive issues, there's a wide variety of different needs. Dyslexia and dyscalculia can kind of be lumped together. Autism has a lot of communication difficulties, so that can be lumped with, although it's not a mental condition, English language learners, and other people with communication issues, so the content itself can be hard to access, in addition to there being other things in the way of accessibility. A lot of people with autism and ADHD also have sensory processing disorder. That's a component of the diagnostic criteria, and people with migraines often behave in a way similar to those with sensory processing disorder. So there are a whole bunch of related tech for that, and that's pretty cool. So over here we see a lot of, this is a dyslexia-friendly font. There are a whole bunch of criteria. And on your left, you'll see the criteria listed for you, as well as a dyslexia-friendly font. I think this one is Open Dyslexia. Everything else is in the bibliography. But over here is the font that was default for this template, and I didn't change it because I kind of wanted to make a point. This fulfills absolutely none of the criteria of a dyslexia-friendly font, because people just don't think about it. They think, oh, that looks pretty, but they never go the extra step to think, can anybody read it? Because they can read it, and so they just kind of run with it. But that's not a particularly helpful mindset for web developers. This here is my Facebook page with screen dimmers on and off. So screen dimmers are particularly helpful with people with sensory processing disorder, autism, ADHD, as well as chronic migraines. This is also good for people who spend way too much time doing their homework at night. It means people can spend more time on their computers with less eye strain. It's just, all of these are free. It's pretty cool stuff. Up here to your left, unfortunately this problem was scrapped, but it was a program that allowed people with PTSD to watch Netflix without adverse mental effects, like flashbacks and blackouts. And it was really cool, but unfortunately it was scrapped because of some logistical issues. Over here is something called Beeline Reader, and it makes it harder for people to skip lines when they're reading and get confused. And this is good for people with focus issues as well as dyslexia. So people with ADHD, people with dissociative disorders, severe depression, anxiety, this whole laundry list of things. And it makes it faster and easier to read large blocks of text. It's also free. So another big thing in accessibility and design is the idea of universal symbols. So given you these two symbols right here, every single person could tell me which one is the setting symbol. And that's an example of really good universal design. We all look for the little gear symbol, and we know that that's where the settings are going to be. And this is good for people who have communication difficulties, for English language learners, for people who can't see the little text that's normally under an app, and just kind of as a general design component. And that's very important for people with learning disabilities and communication and literacy troubles. It's also good for people with SPD. Over here we have a reminders app, and this is especially good with people with memory and executive functioning difficulties. It allows them to keep track of what's called activities of daily living: eating, showering, sleeping, homework, whatever it happens to be, and really function independently, because without this technology it's very difficult for some people to, say, track the passage of time, or understand their body signals that say, hey, I'm hungry, but hey, your phone is telling you it's 5:15 and it's time for dinner, and so you get up and you go to dinner, and it really allows people to have a whole nother degree of independence that they might not otherwise have. So another big thing about accessibility is cost. And in the United States, it is legal as of 1986 to pay disabled people the sub-minimum wage, which means that basically you can pay them less than $1 to work for you, and this means that these costs that you're about to see, although they're inaccessible for you, would probably be dramatically more inaccessible to someone with disabilities. And if a disabled person isn't working, it's even less accessible because they're on disability, which is barely livable for most people. So when we're talking about site-related tech, it's freakishly expensive. The prices, it just racks up. So a screen reader, JAWS, the one we were talking about, which is kind of the gold standard, I googled it, and it's $900 when it's on sale. It's normally $1,100. That's just not feasible for someone who needs that in addition to the cost of a computer just to operate the computer. When we're talking about refreshable braille displays, which are these really cool pieces of tech that basically have a cute little braille display that refreshes when you hit the button and allows you to read the content on the screen on your braille thing, those range from $3,500 to $15,000 depending on the number of characters you have. And that's according to the American Foundation for the Blind. Hearing-related tech is thankfully mostly free, but it's not consistently available, and it's really unreliable. I would encourage everyone to go watch YouTube and use the auto-generated captions instead of the sound for about 10 minutes, because they're horrific, and it's not feasible. Most people who use auto-generated captions have to use hearing, if they have any left, and try to kind of guess, and it's like a game of bad lip reading. All of you remember those old YouTube videos? It's just not good. When we're talking about fine motor and dexterity related tech, it's extraordinarily expensive. Each piece ranges from several $100s to several thousand, and there are a whole bunch of other logistical issues that make it much, much harder to actually run efficiently. The one-handed keyboard that we saw earlier was about $500, and that's bad. So I told you to remember the sit puff switch, and as I was reading the website and, the different, requirements and specs, the price just kept racking up in my head. So you have the cost of replacing the disposable tubing that goes from your mouth to the filter. You have to replace the filter, which is what keeps the switch that actually tells your computer whether you're blowing or puffing from getting condensation on it and dying. You've got a headset that has to hold the tube in place. You have a USB-based interface that translates the other switch, the one that hooks up to the filter, and tells your computer what's going on. You have the switch that actually deals with the puffing and the blowing. And then you have an adapter that will have to go between the USB and your tablet or the USB and your phone. And then the website was just awful. I had to go like 6 clicks deep. I had to download like 2 PDFs. PDFs are normally accessible for screen readers. And it was just, I couldn't find the prices for any of this. It was just really bad. Thankfully, cognitive-related tech is normally free and or open source, or you can get it for super cheap. But most people, even people with conditions who really do need this tech, they don't know it exists because there aren't a whole lot of resources for it, and so computers remain inaccessible for them. If you have any questions, please just kind of hit me up. Let us know. Awesome. Here's the bibliography. We have a couple sources. Awesome. Thank you.